But okay, I didn't change anything though, so you must have changed something. Does that sound all right? All right, good. Yeah, these Apple earbuds are pretty good.
This is all being live streamed and recorded.
So don't say anything. Don't like breach attorney-client privilege or anything like that. So who will be in attendance or who is there? Are people there already? Hello. Oh, whoa, that's weird. I'm looking at some infinite loop now because I'm looking at myself. Okay, great.
Prefer to be looking at the audience.
Um, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. It's kind of nice to, well, maybe you guys. It's gonna kind of be a conversation, right? That's right. I know. It's kind of weird. It feels like we've spent a lot of time in person. So, Leslie, you'll just prompt me with questions, yeah?
If you have additional things you want to add.
Great. And is the audience mostly current students? Is it Rising 3Ls? Is it other?
Professors, law librarians.
Oh.
Okay, yeah. So
Can I ask the librarians a quick preliminary question? Do you guys still, just out of curiosity, do you still teach any book research to students?
unfortunately, sometimes it's necessary, so I start with
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I heard pretty well. Yeah, because I just learned. I was in the. I mean, I finished law school in 2004, but I was in one of the last classes at Harvard Law where any book like research was taught at all. They kind of gave up on it. It's a little. I don't know. Maybe it's a little sad. I mean, I'm sentimental.
get started. South Carolina Legal Services, which is called legal aid. Sometimes they call them legal services. Same thing. I'm here with three colleagues. Susie Ingalls, also with Legal Services. She is our consumer law unit head. And then we have Vlad Maslinger. He is also licensed as an attorney. Clients, he helps with all of our web content. And then
Hey, lad.
I believe it is
Hmm.
Law Hub, which is a contractor. So we are legal services, and I bet you all have some idea what that is, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we are a nonprofit that helps people with such as family law, consumer law, landlord-tenant issues, and we help people with low income. However, as you could probably imagine, there are a lot more people with low income funding than us. We get about 18,000 calls a year, and we have 50. There's still a real legal need, a real practical need for people who cannot always access a paying attorney, pro bono, or legal services. There's still a huge gap there for us to get to legal justice and full representation for everyone. We got a grant from Legal Services Technology and Grant, which helped us create this platform that we are going back and students and in their own learning, and then also they could use it to then teach other people. one of the people here in the room who helped, Elmer Masters and John Mayer, were two of the people who helped. Of course, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is created to help legal aids and help students learn here. So this is the website, learnthelaw.org. And then when you get to there, you click on classrooms and you can see all these states. In the next hour after this is going to go much more in detail about the product itself and what the project looks like. But I just wanted to give you a little talking about. When we say classroom on here, this is not at all to replace. A tool that somebody can create to teach people about a legal topic and to break down the defense. And this one's a guide. Digest it, and many times tried very hard to get this into language everyone would understand. Incorporate it into this. So I'm going to give you an example. The first one is going to be one that Adam
Oh, it's a landlord tenant one. Oh, nothing.
Housing repairs. You have a right to a livable home. When you rent a home in South Carolina, your landlord has an obligation to keep that home safe and healthy. This is sometimes called the warranty of habitability. This means that there can be no threats to health and safety or other serious problems with the home. There must be access to essential services like water and heating and important appliances. Examples of unsafe or unhealthy conditions include no heat or hot water, leaky plumbing, mold, pests, missing door locks, and electrical problems. If your house is unsafe or unhealthy because of a condition like this, your landlord has to fix it. It's the law. First of all, as long as you are living in the home, it's best to keep paying rent. If you withhold rent, your landlord may file for eviction. You will then have to raise the issues of repairs while defending an eviction case. Step 1. Notify the landlord. Send a polite and clearly written letter to your landlord asking for repairs. Include a list of all of the repairs needed, when the damage occurred, and a reasonable deadline to make the repairs. Usually, it's best to give your landlord at least 14 days. Your letter also needs to say what you're going to do if repairs aren't made.
This character, Clark, that we created. Susie, would you like to talk more about Clark and why he's helpful?
Yeah, and then I'll kick it over to Adam because his team is the one that created Clark. But we were looking for something that would be kind of a hook at the beginning of each classroom. And morph into, I think, a real series where Clark and a video on each legal topic will be something that the public and our clientele will, which was with a topic that we were supposed to subcontract or a third party to create this character and then help us create these videos. So Adam, talk about that. was working with other lawyers who are actually mostly busy practicing law, where you're kind of doing the other side of that.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. It was really fun seeing that. I should also note that Leslie did some voice acting for us in one of the videos because we for a variety of reasons, in part because it was a very sensitive topic of sort of instructional video on advice in testifying in domestic violence hearings. Am I loud enough? Okay, great. Um, and so we wanted to have a female voice and a sort of more authentic, less kind of salesy, professional sounding voice. So Leslie did the voiceover, and I think it sounds really, really good. So everyone should listen to watch that video as well. So yeah, I'll comment a bit about maybe first sort of how I got into this kind of weird line of work in producing legal explainer videos, and then talk a bit about this particular project. So the quick version is I was I love law school, but by 2L year I got a little bored and wanted some kind of creative outlet. So I just taught myself how to make documentaries just as a side project. I went to Nigeria my 1L summer to do a human rights fellowship and ended up bringing a camera along. And in addition to my normal work, long story short, shot some video. I worked on these huge forced eviction cases, massive, challenging human rights cases. And instead of writing another human rights report, I made a set of short videos to try to pressure our government opponents to settle the case. And long story short, worked incredibly well, much better than like another conventional human rights report would have been. And so I kind of got this idea that maybe we could be doing, public interest lawyers can be using all this great new technology better. Now, this was a while ago. This was like 2002. So this is right when you could just first start editing video on a laptop, way before YouTube or anything like that. So a lot of this stuff was pretty cutting edge at the time. Anyway, then I continued on my career, ended up with a Skadden Fellowship to work at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law in DC. And part of my fellowship was sort of designed to try to experiment with using video and multimedia storytelling to sort of help tip the balance in otherwise really challenging or unwinnable cases. And so we did a bunch of stuff and tried a whole bunch of different things. But one of the big aha moments was we were representing these 13 African American guys in a big Title VII case, and this is in Alabama. And if I'm going too long on this stuff, Leslie, just stop me and move me forward. But the origin story, I think, is kind of interesting. So we represented these guys, and the facts of the case were very dramatic. We had an actual whites-only bathroom in this facility, this poultry plant where our clients worked. And, we had evidence that like the head of HR had seen like a whites only sign that had been on the door, really like dramatic stuff. And we were kind of like, perversely like high-fiving around the table when we heard about the case because the facts were so extreme with them. This is a kind of a quick win. We can get a remedy for our clients. But alas, it was not the case. We sued this big defendant. We got into litigation. We did a bunch of depositions, and they were just terrible for the other side. I mean, their witnesses were throwing around the N-word and just saying really horrible admissions, and our clients were really excellent. And we went to go settle, and the mediator just couldn't see the forest for the trees, really, and said, oh, well, I get there was a whites-only bathroom, but you can't really prove damages, etc. You should just take the $10,000 they're offering you and go home. And we were like completely shocked. We're like, don't you understand how bad these witnesses are? And so in a kind of act of desperation, I went home that weekend and I edited a video out of the deposition, these pretty terrible quality deposition videos, and kind of created my perfect trial with little documentary elements in there as well. And we showed it to the mediator the next week. And he immediately, called the other side and said, hey, you've got to raise your offer. I didn't realize how terrible your witnesses were. And then a week later, we ended up settling for $1.3 million, up from $10,000, and all of the injunctive relief we asked for, like everything. And that was the moment where I thought, all right, well, this is something that we need to be doing better. Plaintiffs' lawyers in the private sector are doing this really well. Why can't lawyers for the most vulnerable communities do this also? So I set out to do that. And I founded an organization called the New Media Advocacy Project, which we call NMAP. And we have a new website. It's nmap.co. Which everyone should take a look at if you're interested in kind of human rights and public interest law and media. And I just got really, really good at making beautiful short videos about really arcane legal subjects. And our team just did that for almost a decade, working in some of the most challenging human rights cases around, and lots of public interest cases in the US also. And we started dipping our toes into helping legal services and doing broader based, more scalable projects. But we didn't do a huge amount. So when I left NMAP, I wanted to focus on more domestic work. I founded this company called Law Hub, whose mission was really more focused on legal empowerment, designed to, how can we use this, again, slightly unusual skill of explaining legal issues in like a really concise way and making beautiful videos to do it. How can we do that to educate the public about legal issues? Then I had a kid, right? And suddenly like all these small legal issues kept popping up. Nothing major, but like things about medical decision making and health insurance and estate planning. And I just was really appalled at the quality of information out there. It's like pretty bad. And so we founded Law Hub to do this kind of work, working with partners to create this media. And we founded another company called Briefly, which is more of a platform designed to help consumers navigate legal issues around major life events. So that's been kind of my career path. And so we were contacted by SCLS to work on this classroom project. And immediately we just loved the idea, in part because it was such a privilege to be able to work on such a broad set of issues with such a kind of really interesting broad group of lawyers. And maybe it's me just like I got into this work in part because I can't commit to any I could never just be an employment lawyer. Like I'm kind of a generalist. And so it's really fun to be able to work on to have a basic kind of lawyer's mind in terms of kind of issue spotting and thinking through legal issues, but able to work on a whole variety of issues. So yes, so we were contacted by SCLS and very excited to do the project. Came clear though, since we are doing 5 different videos on 5 really broad range of topics. It was housing, it was consumer debt, it was domestic violence, it was even kind of issues of aging and legal capacities. So a really wide range of issues. We needed a unifying theme, and this is where this character Clark came in. Now I didn't think of Clark as Clark until actually I think I only learned Clark was named Clark a few months ago when Susie told me. But we needed a kind of relatable character who didn't kind of raise any red flags in terms of kind of gender and race representation. It was kind of cartoony and generic. And that was sort of how this character was developed, right? And how can we create a visual style that's engaging, that's way better than most of what's out there in terms of legal information, but also not distracting, right? The focus should still be on the educational goal of these videos. And that's how we develop this visual style. So I'll stop there. Do you want me to talk a bit more about the process, about the style? Or should I throw it back to you guys, talk about what it was like getting to work with us?
Specialize, so to speak. People need to know. And pick your topics.
Okay, my topic was debt collection and summary. It's an issue that we've seen clients have a lot of problems with because the company procedure in what we call it summary court. It's also called magistrate court, and it's we usually think of claim and delivery as being like mobile homes where security your weed in those, but the that you really needed to of course with our client customer would not then these claim and delivery actions and threaten to take this property. And one of the things that I saw a problem with quite often was computers, like laptop computers, and it was and game consoles too, because parents wouldn't want their child's game console to be taken because that was really important to them. But at the same time, people had laptop computers with all their information on it, and they didn't realize that they could do something about that. So we have been trying about their rights and those kind of actions. And so that's what I can talk later about how with our law students that were helping us, we took something that really was simple and we said,
Topics in our sort of area of law we think the average person needs to know about, or the people who are the least represented. In charge of one or two classrooms where we break it down into these bite-sized pieces, and then could incorporate different kinds of technology and different kinds of learning styles to make it more interesting. And so that's how we brought in Law Hub, because but we also did a couple other things. For example,
I was hoping that Adam could maybe comment on what with all of us, five lawyers that you were able options.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Whoa, how's that? Better? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so let me just comment a bit about how the process works more broadly. We are a group of lawyers whose expertise is in explaining legal issues in a very concise and clear manner. We work with a set of designers, animators, we even have game designers we work with who understand certain aspects of kind of communication and video production. And so we kind of translate for them what we think our lawyer clients need. And then we ask them to, at every stage of this production process, generate a set of choices for our clients, right? So we start off with just a general design style. If anyone's worked with a graphic designer or like a branding agency, they often call these kind of style frames. And these are really broad styles writ large, right? So it's everything from color to typeface to look and feel and tone. Like what level of humor do we want? How realistic versus how iconic do we want these things? Are they stick figures or are they really realistic characters? Are they cartoony? If they are cartoony, are they silly cartoony? Like all the do we want characters like humans, or do we want to use something different like monsters or just generic stick figures to avoid some of those issues around race and gender and representation, which can be so challenging when working with diverse audiences. So we kind of think that whole like hodgepodge of questions, and we try to deliver to our clients, in this case SCLS, between 2 and 5 options. I actually was trying to, in a frenzy, search way back in our email to see what some of the other choices were. And I actually don't remember now, but we tend to give a pretty wide range of options. And I remember what was interesting about this particular case was that the Clark visual style that we chose, that's not just the character, it's all the other stuff, the illustrations, we call them assets, all the different props and scenes, the colors, the typeface. This was actually what we consider to be the most risky or the most edgy of the styles that we presented. Some of the others were more generic, like what you might see in a generic kind of explainer video with more conventional colors and slightly more realistic looking characters. But this was like by far the most bold. And I remember after we got off the phone, and you guys actually universally pretty much agreed this was the one you wanted to go with, the different styles. And Scott is my lead animator, we were like completely thrilled that you guys wanted to go. We usually throw in one kind of more bold choice that we kind of feel like, well, they're probably not going to go for that, but let's throw something in that's a little bit more unusual, more avant-garde, more cutting edge. And in this case, or more contemporary. This was that style. So you guys were among our boldest clients, and you chose something really, really cool. A couple other things, if anyone has any technical interest in this stuff, there's also a choice we have between doing 2D animation or 3D animation, which is sort of interesting. Though the two are blending together now, the 3D animation, this is useful if anyone wants to do an animation project. It's good to be fluent in this stuff. The 3D animation, this is like Pixar movies and things like that. The animators actually build what they call a rig. It's like a kind of computerized marionette that they can manipulate instead of creating every frame of animation. And so it's more expensive to create those rigs up front, but once you do, it's an easier to make more video. It's more scalable. And so here we chose to do, because we didn't have a huge amount of video to make, we chose to do something that looked more like 2D animation, though it was actually kind of a hybrid. So these characters are still built on these kind of marionettes that they can manipulate. So anyway, a little bit of technical information.
One thing, and while we'll get into about how to form your team on this, but just to give you a little bit more information, because I know all of you are probably very well different kinds of learning. Sometimes create a classroom setup, for example, and show them a courtroom setup.
My cousin
All
Vinny.
rise. Thank you. You may be seated. ABC Credit versus Tracy Blackford. So I see present in the courtroom today is Mr. Seymour Bucks, representing ABC Credit.
People an idea of what will actually feel like when you're in court, what to expect, the decorum and everything. Situation that we used, and then we also had videos of some of us just sort of teaching people, here are 10 things you need to know.
My name's Leslie Fisk. I'm an attorney at South Carolina Legal Services. Other attorneys and I have prepared a few tips to help you be prepared for your order of protection hearing.
Forums to try to make it interesting for people, to capture people's interest, and we kind of assume that people would rather watch videos than they would just read type. But of course we did add the documents that people need to fill out, and Susie will go more into that in her session, exactly what we put all in there. But we had to think, who is our audience, what do they need to know, and then move to what types of data, and then we were in charge of making that expert, so this was very new. So I want to get into all those working partnerships in just a minute, but first one, students. In their area to really get a good example of what the population is like. Do you want to speak on that for a minute?
The classrooms to and we were actually sort of learning. I think ours was the first one that we did, and like I said earlier, we tried to make it way you can do with the law students that you might hear Dave, you're with this morning, because if you're teaching a particular subject and you want to integrate some tech into that, you can say, hey, legal matter. And so they're learning that legal subject matter. And the really great thing about the Learn the Law platform, if I may, is the fact that although it's been around for a few years, deliver information, you can use those other ways to deliver information, but you can insert them into your classroom. So we'll be always able to update these classrooms with
Very well
Also,
said.
if I could just add, while the classrooms are hosted on Learn the Law website, the access point itself is on our website. So when we advertise the classroom availability, what topics are, what they are about, so that it's easier for the person trying to find them to actually find them.
So we really see this helping you options to you. To the actual process. You learn feels if you are a landlord who can't afford and just telling somebody the process and it also helps the creator of the project in take all the information, break it down into bite-sized pieces. Saying you really
learning how to respond to one of these so we have the within that our clientele, the people that were really our audience, and we had a so the law students came over for that clinic, and they really needed those simple concepts. They weren't going to be able to spend 30 minutes, or maybe they would be able to, but they wouldn't. So we ended up going back to square one and guided interviews. Volunteers who want to help somebody with a debt collection case, they'll be able to use that more complicated guide.
a couple other examples of how law students could use this is one, create videos for pro bono attorneys. Here a little bit of know how to do it, and it's going to take a long time to figure out. Classroom to teach pro bono attorneys how they could do that. To the class. Had an idea from a previous presentation I attended earlier. Ask the same questions over and over and over again sometimes.
Mind if I recorded this? But I could also, you know, if you forget, you can always go back here and hear it again, or about certain points. And so, of course, they said, "Oh, sure, that's." I said, "I'm not going to have your picture on the last two." I think they call it, and it's audio, but still 20,000 people listen to that thing, which is a little disconcerting. Mediums that all different sorts of use and be comfortable with.
So
I
we
think also, can I just add, what Susan just said, you can create a class, or you can also just together in one area, so that it kind of goes step by step, and hopefully have it be more helpful to that person, having it kind of all together as opposed to being able to find one thing here, one thing there, one thing the other place. Where
are going to take this, take on a project, or have your students take on a project. Because it's now been almost 3 years. Next time around, who do you think it is essential to have on a team?
Well, here I want to give a shout out to US author projects, and that was so helpful because I had no idea how to do that. I know there's tutorials and everything.
As a partner in this project is because of that videos, people are still again, you know, that was so neat. So they're very memorable, and I think really capture people's attention. You do talk to a practicing attorney and have them in on the team. Because sometimes the law says one thing and what actually happens in the courthouses is something completely different. Section 1, I sent an email to all the attorneys. So here are the 5 forms that we are all supposed to use. I've heard that in some counties there's some 6th form that they want. If you all have one of those, send them to me. And I got also let you know how you want to put that in your video. If you had somebody who had only worked in, they would have put a form that wouldn't have worked for anybody else. So I think it is really important to have a practicing attorney on the team, so that they can really talk about their experiences. Projects, what lessons they learned, and one about to change. And right after he finished it, they changed the law in all the forms.
Which is what's great about learning the law, because
Yes.
you can easily, you know.
Yes. We now still have a guardianship classroom. Ideally, if you're taking this project that is not about to change. Kinks that people find, you know, included, and then they change the form again. And somebody says, this is confusing, they change the form again. So ideally, we suggest you pick a project where that is not going to happen, but as Susie mentioned, the fact that this is can be edited at any point has been really helpful. Project they changed a form, and it was very easy to go in and change the form that was in there.
Well, if I could just, add to that a little bit. The old cliche, expect the unexpected, that's what happened with us, with this particular classroom, is the guardianship classroom, where the law was changing. And I was leaving the organization as well. So, the deadline for launching the classrooms, and we had these huge unexpected events happening to us, where we had to kind of almost start from scratch. We had to redo the videos that we had done already. Had to redo the classroom. I know come out.
Charge of making sure it has the deadlines, and our person was Vlad, so
Honestly, it's been kind of tricky at times to kind of keep them all on the same schedule. They do like deadlines, so if you give them a specific deadline for when X or Y needs to be done, they're more likely to do it versus if you just say, hey, can you do this or that or the other. And then also you have to be able to kind of work with their schedule, understand that this is not the only thing that they have going on. So if you need to reschedule something last minute or change things around, you got to be flexible with all that and kind of just. And another thing, because we had our money for the project from a LSC grant. Follow those pretty carefully. Read the grant itself. Deadline requirements for each deadline. What needs to be done by that deadline. And for me, this was like a first kind of a project of this kind that I was working on. So it took me a little while to kind of get used to what it is that's expected of me as a project manager to kind of keep the project on track. But I think once you get a hang of it, it becomes kind of easier and kind of get used to the.
Lassoing attorneys and other people that you need feedback from?
Yeah, I'll provide one comment on that, but also then want to make another pitch. So, yeah, I think what's critical from the standpoint of any kind of media production is that all of the feedback from the entire team get consolidated and one person deliver it to whoever's producing the content. This is because you often will have debates between, not everyone agrees on what should happen, especially when it comes to visuals. There's always matters of taste. So the worst thing that can happen to us as a vendor is if we have two people in our client giving us contradictory feedback, or we get one set of comments, then another, and then another, and you kind of go back and forth. That can be really challenging. So it's really critical that we appoint one person inside inside our client, in this case it's Vlad, to kind of consolidate all the feedback, deal with any disputes or mediate disputes before submitting the feedback to us. That is absolutely critical. The other thing that's important when producing any kind of media, particularly video and animation, but other kinds of media as well, it's important to realize that the production process is kind of it's like a funnel where it gets more and more expensive to change things the farther you go. So if you're just doing a script, that's easy. You just change the Word document the script's written in. But then when you have storyboards, well, then you've got to change visuals. And once you have animation, to change that is very expensive. And so it's really important to nail all this stuff down very early in the process. This is less true when recording audio, but even then, it's much easier to change the script than it is to go back and edit the actual audio or re-record the whole thing. So that's my advice on kind of wrangling all the members of the team. But as Leslie mentioned, they've got to jump. But one thing that I would like to sort of make a pitch on, and Susie will recognize me talking about this quite a bit. One thing that I find that it's relatively easy to get funding for production. Like you can go to funders and they're happy to produce more content. Not always, but often it's a pretty easy sell. Hey, we're going to make these incredible videos and these audio pieces that are going to get 20,000 views because they're really needed. But what it's hard to get funding for is any kind of user testing. And we as a field just don't know that much about how people engage with and learn about legal issues. And there's just a huge need for better user testing. So much money is poured into stuff that no one watches. So if students are interested in this sort of thing in law and technology or law and media, to rope them into any kind of user testing project would be really, really great. They're hard to do, they're expensive, it's hard to find. People talk about, oh, just user test that. It's actually very, very hard and time consuming to get an engine of testing going, but it's really, really needed. So that's my pitch. Make less, but test more so we can learn when we put money into producing more stuff, what's actually going to work.
Thank you so much for joining us, Adam. I know it's been a good experience for us to have you with us just to kind of have a post-mortem on the whole project like this. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for including me. It's a lot of fun. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
One of the other partners that we use that was helpful for us, and it probably exists in the state that you're from too, is the BAR CLE program here in South Carolina has its own videotaping studio, and they want to create CLE content because they want to make money off of it. But they also are willing to partner with us on various projects sometimes, and they were willing to tape videos for us. And so, and they looked pretty professional, set up, law books and all that kind of stuff. And that was a neat experience also. So that is a good low cost, as in free, partner that you can look into. And also meant to mention that learnthelaw.org does not cost anything. It is free of charge because it is for low-income folks and for law students and pro bono attorneys to learn. And a couple of our projects, I know I did one project that was for the audience of lawyers. So most of these are for your average person who just needs legal information but probably doesn't know anything about the law. You can also make them for lawyers, such as making them for pro bono lawyers. In my case, I did contested visitation and custody cases when your client is a domestic violence survivor. There's additional concepts that you need to know and things that come up often, and so that is a very different experience when you're teaching attorneys than when you're teaching your average person.
Liz, if I could just add also, this goes back a little bit to your point about deciding which partners to use for your project. And I think, it just goes back to your own organization, what your strengths and weaknesses are as an organization. Like if you have an expert who's good at advertising, you don't need to, contract that out. If you have somebody who's good at producing videos, you don't need to contract that out because they're in-house. But if there's somebody that you don't have in-house, that's probably a good area for you to try to find outside help. But when working with partners, make sure that you're always on the same page as to what the expectations are and what the deadlines are and what the project actually entails. Make sure you communicate with them regularly and properly, that you stay involved in their process to make sure that you get what you actually are expecting to get. Because you don't want to get to the end of the line, to the finish line, where you think X and Y needs to be done, and you talk to your partners and they either thought it was something else or they didn't meet your expectations. So you want to make sure that you kind of can catch that, if that happens, that you catch that early enough, like Adam was saying, early in the process enough where it would be easier to fix and correct if it needs to be corrected.
And also I think you need to know your audience. Susan, you want to talk about maybe the different levels that people might have of understanding and what we're trying to convey?
Yeah, I think, a lot of this is intended for people who are representing themselves or, the self-represented litigant. And I see the self-represented litigants as kind of three categories. There's people who are educated enough to be able to really use material and understand it a little bit to go to court with. And there's people who maybe don't have quite the understanding of their rights and the technicalities of the area of law, but maybe they're really good at not being scared to talk in a courtroom. And then you've got people who have neither of those, and maybe people who have both of those. So you have to think about that, when you're adding all these things to the classroom, because there's going to be people who can talk very well in court, but they really don't understand what they're talking about, and and things like that. And I would say one other thing for you guys as law professors and law librarians and all, if you go to learnthelaw.org and look at some of those classrooms, there's several items on there that are simply a checklist. And so checklists can be really helpful, especially for lawyers, and that's something that's quick and easy to do as an assignment for one of your classes, is to say, hey, we've been learning about foreclosure defense. Go here and create a checklist of everything that someone who's being foreclosed on needs to think about, or something like that. So there's so many ways, I think, to use that. And again, different levels of learning for the audience that we're really trying to address. But I think that Learn the Law platform is a real good one for that.
And Vlad pointed out the University of Georgia School of Law is starting to work on this as well. So apparently they are already in process. You can work on the projects before they're posted live, which I really appreciated because you can sort of have many rough drafts before you decide that it is good enough. So based on this, they're probably in the drafting stage.
Yeah, don't click on that, that's me. I don't have a lot of content on there yet. We're working on it.
But it's a lot of what we did sounds like it was real complicated, and it did take a long time and everything, but there's so many little simple things that you can do, so don't be afraid to use it. It doesn't have to be a major project with your local legal aid. It can just be some simple thing like a checklist or a pleading on some particular legal topic.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as just words, it could be as simple as just forms, it could be just videos, and it could be a combination of all those things. What questions or comments do you all have? Yeah.
So, for everybody in the room, both Learn the Law and AJ Author are Cali projects at this point. So, those are freely available for use by Cali members, which I think is everybody in the room. So if you're interested in using these tools the folks from South Carolina here have done some great work with this, and I was happy to see them sort of pop up because the thing had been sort of sitting there for a little while. Nobody had been using it, and, so it was exciting that they came along and made me update it. So So if you have, if you're interested in using it, it is available.
Did you have to put any thought or consideration, I'm sure you did, but into disclaimers about legal advice, and this is not, I might have missed that part at the beginning.
There was one at the beginning of each
What?
one.
Yeah, each video that we included in the classroom, there's a disclaimer stating that this is not legal advice, blah, 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 that you need to contact the lawyer.
Yeah,
That kind of
Oh, there it is.
For sure.
Yep, there it is.
I'm from South Carolina. I'll submit that because I'm asked, you'll know to ask the question. I see on Law Help SC which ones you have up there. Are y'all planning on doing other ones?
We actually I was getting ready to talk about the technology innovation grants, which that's how Law Help started, right, with a technology innovation grant from Legal Services Corporation. That's how we funded ours, and we're applying for another 6 classes to do. So we're really excited about that, and this is what they call, with the technology innovation grants, a replicated, I think they call it, project. And what that means is they like to see projects that they've already funded be used to do another project. And so, like Elmer said, I think that's, hopefully that's part of why this project got accepted to begin with, because we had looked back at other grants to see how did they do things like this, and that's really where we found Learn the Law.
Well, these are fabulous law librarians, and I'm thrilled to see them.
Thanks.
And I also think depending on the topic for marketing purposes, that person who creates that project or that team that creates the project needs to think about how to market it the best. For my domestic violence order of protection ones, it's going to be the clerks at the courthouses and victim advocates. But that's not going to be the same for guardianship, you know. So what the team really needs to think about who needs to hear this and how do we get the message to those people.
Right, if your audience is gonna be people who, you know, maybe don't have a college education, you wanna think about what kind of language you're using and stuff like that. You wanna talk about things in more simple terms.
What other questions or comments?
Well, if there's not a question yet, I can say this, it certainly is a point that I wanted to make, and that is, for what we did and the way we did this more kind of lengthy classroom thing, it takes a lot of time to do this much. That's why I encourage you, if you're doing it like for a classroom in law school, you maybe want to do it in those smaller chunks, because when we were writing this grant and we had to say how long it was going to take, and I think we talked about it being 2 years, and when somebody first said 2 years, I was like, it's not going to take that long. You know, we've got all this material, we'll just pop it in the classroom, it's not going to take that long. But it did. It took every bit of 2 years. I think part of that for us was that we had our regular, you know, busy practice of law with our caseload and all the other requirements of us, and this was kind of an extra requirement. And so Vlad was really herding cattle trying to meet those deadlines. But I think we did all right, didn't we?
I represent the low-tech part of this whole team, and so I know you all are not like that, but you have to explain it to other people, to your own organizations and schools who are also low-tech. So I suggest not calling it an online classroom if that would make them glaze over. So what I try to say is it is a website where you can learn about all different kinds of legal topics, and you pick a legal topic and it breaks it down into small bites that are easier to understand.
Yeah, and you can find out just even with the videos, which are very short. We feel like the videos are pretty attractive to people, to the viewer, and so they're going to at least hopefully get that much of it. You know, and so if they're getting that much of it, it's kind of like Leslie was saying to me yesterday. She said people don't always understand their rights. Like they don't know that they've got, you know, they know that maybe they've got mold in their apartment, but they don't realize what their rights are on that. And she said sometimes a video like that can make them realize, I'm coughing, lawyer. Lawyer. So I thought that was a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
And also, if there's one also thing that I should mention, I think Adam talked about it a little bit, but if you work in a classroom, you're probably an expert in that subject matter. So make sure that you test it with people that are not experts in that area. Because when you're working on it and you know the subject, you think it all makes sense. Make sure you get a pair of eyes who don't know what's going on, take a look at it to make sure that it actually does make sense, so that it's actually helpful to people that you're trying to reach as opposed to just people like you who may know the topic already.
I think that's excellent advice. Well, I wanted to let you all know that I still stay in touch with the law librarian that was in law school with me 12 years ago, and she made a huge impact on my career and staying in law school. So thank you for all of what you do. Same ditto for a couple professors. I know you're really inspiring a lot of people, whether they tell you or not.
Okay, we'll end it there. Thanks, everybody. Keep in mind the recording device is still on. We'll take you for
another
two
minute
more.
or so.
And in half an hour, Susie is going to go more over the product itself that we
We'll be
created.
looking more at the classrooms themselves, and hopefully y'all can join us for that, or go get another subject under your belt.
I like it.
Perfectly on time.
Talk about meeting deadlines, huh?
I feel like we should have an